What about on climate policy? Your leader, Peter Dutton, said over the weekend, part of the reason you can win back so-called teal seats is a credible climate policy. Will a credible climate policy have to include an update on your party's previous 2030 emissions reduction pledge?
What we'll have before the next election is clearly greater evidence around how Australia is tracking towards that 2030 commitment, the commitment that is now being made under the Paris Agreement, and that is Australia's commitment, and we will have to assess how the country is tracking towards that. My hope will be that Australia is tracking towards meeting that commitment. We were exceeding the commitment the previous government had made. And as I've said before, it would have made sense, given that we were on track to exceed that commitment, for us to have updated that commitment prior to the last election. And that was a missed opportunity. It didn't.
But beyond
happen.
Just sort of
Australia has now committed to a higher level of...
Yeah, beyond what was going to happen anyway, do you think it's going to need a significant sort of increase in ambition from your party?
Well, Australia now has a target and a commitment that has been made under the Paris Agreement. That is the nation's starting point and working point. It's the one that we will have to work against too, but we will have to assess how Australia is tracking towards that. As always, I have high ambitions when it comes to achieving net zero and the desire to do that as quickly as possible. But it's got to be balanced against the costs to Australian households, businesses and the economy, which is why we'll be making sure that people also understand the degree of challenge and that we are willing to take difficult decisions. And as you can see from
what you're saying there is the 43%
nuclear energy
the government under Labor's committed to would be hard to walk away from. Is that what you're saying?
The 2030 targets are now Australia's commitment under the Paris Agreement, and so that is what we will have to assess against. And those assessments will have to be looking at the evidence as to how Australia is tracking, how existing policies that we support are tracking. We, of course, will need to be taking policies that look longer term than that, and particularly look to the whole trajectory out to achieving net zero. And there are real questions about whether net zero can be achieved without taking some tough decisions like nuclear energy. And that's what Peter Dutton is alluding to when he talks about having credible policies, taking tough decisions. There is not a simple, easy pathway, and there are some parts of policy that have been seen to be untouchable, like nuclear energy in Australia for a long period of time, that we are going to have to assess if the country is to have a truly
we'll see on that front
to net zero and energy security.
Sorry to jump in again, nearly out of time. I need to get this question for you because the Malaysian Prime Minister is in town, of course, and so far the government has said it's not willing, the Malaysian government, to recommence a search for MH370. Australian families connected to this saying we should. Should Australia consider its own search, even if the Malaysian government doesn't want to go ahead with it?
There have been significant efforts made over the last 10 years to seek to find MH370, and of course it's been a very traumatic period for all of the families involved, those of the Australians, those of the other nationalities, including many Malaysians whose lives were lost in that tragedy. We should be looking to continue to make sure that anything that is credible and gives new hope and new possibility is something that we should back and that we should seek to pursue with our other partners. But it needs to obviously be an effort that gives sufficient new hope and new possibility to deserve that type of backing, and hopefully then winning regional backing, including of Malaysia, to be able to pursue those undertakings. And I would be guided by the evidence around that in terms of those experts who present the case and the structure as to how we can best make sure that new programs might give a greater chance of success. We should absolutely be willing to invest. We should be willing to encourage others to invest, but it's got to also be a credible pathway.
Got to leave it there. Sam Birmingham, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. My pleasure.